Hello, everyone. This is so wonderful to see you signing in. I can see lots of friends, both old and new. It's really wonderful to see some people that have been part of my change journey for more than a decade are here today, which is really exciting. Very happy about that. Good to see some of the Issoria team are here too, which is wonderful. Some folks that I have met very recently, which is lovely because, you know, when you meet people and you talk about what you're doing in the community and then all of a sudden they show up, that feels very cool. So I think we'll give it 2 more minutes and then we'll get started. And it's really lovely to see also in this particular situation, you know, even some of the people that I know are very experienced change practitioners. This particular subject or topic that we're going to be talking about today is something we should always be thinking about and learning from each other. And Martin, Saskia, and I have had some wonderful conversations getting ready for today. But the world has changed. The world keeps changing so much. So I'm delighted that some of my more experienced colleagues are here, as well as some who are sort of in the starting out areas of their change management practice, whether they are as consultants or internal resources. So as we get the last people into the call, I'm just going to start off by doing a little bit of the sort of level setting and background stuff before we get into the meaty part of our conversation. So welcome everybody. I am Ursula Erasmus. Some of you will know me from the Issoria Community, which I lead. Some of you will know me from past collaborations where either we've worked together in organizations or I may have been a consultant working on one of your programs. And some of you may be very new to me and the Issoria Community, and we really hope, if that's the case, that this first experience of us is a good one for you. Philosophically, the Issoria Community is a container that is very much an open source space for the exchange of ideas and the elevation of our practice as change practitioners and OD practitioners. We are going to spend an hour today, and this is part 2 of our focus on change ambassadors, change agents, change champions, change buddies, whatever you like to call them in your organization, but the people who help us make change work. So if you missed part 1, please definitely let us know. And Jen, who is my Issoria partner in crime, will make sure that you get whatever you need in terms of recording and output from part 1. So for today, I would like to briefly introduce our panelists. We have with us today Saskia van Berg, and I know Saskia in a client type of relationship. So Saskia is from Philips, and I had a wonderful experience partnering with Saskia when I was delivering some of the Philips change leadership programs. Saskia is smart, pithy, very innovative in her thinking, and definitely doesn't hold back. So welcome, Saskia, and thank you again for your collaboration in this space. It's awesome to have you.
It's really great to be here. And with that kind of introduction, I'm looking very much forward to today. Thank you.
Perfect. And we also have Martin Dvořák. Martin is one of our Issoria consultants. So he's a colleague who fits sort of the other part of my life. And Martin has great experience as a change practitioner consultant, lots of different organizations in different parts of the world, so understands those sort of cultural nuances, etc. And like Saskia, Martin also has some very good ideas that he brings right from the trenches. And so I would say here today we have an ace team. So welcome, Saskia and Martin, and thanks again for being here.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
What are we talking about today? Well, we know that change ambassadors are important because we read it in all the methodologies and all the articles and so on. But I wanted just to be briefly a little bit more clear than that. If you think about what makes change work, it's really the conversations around what is going to be changing. So helping people get a visual, a vision, a picture of what is changing and helping them see that. And a lot of the conversations are then to nudge people along a journey to embrace new ideas, get upskilled and ready for new ideas, and then start exploring and working in new ways. And if we think about it, and I think back to the days when I was actually a department head rather than an internal consultant and a people leader, a lot of my work was trying to help my team figure out how we were going to navigate this change. Great. But of course, the rest of my workload didn't go away. And so the amount of time I had was quite limited to devote to that. And this is where I think the value of a network of change agents or change ambassadors really comes in. These are people that from a people leader perspective can really extend our reach. But it's also not only the people leader who benefits from a great network like this, it is also the change practitioners. Because if you think of the change practitioner, whether an internal resource or an external resource, working on a project or a program to help bring a new solution to the business, one person versus potentially hundreds, if not thousands, of impacted individuals. So what as a change practitioner is needed is someone who brings back information from the trenches, someone who is there as part of the, if you like, early adopter, best friend, most curious type of individual who also helps the change practitioner stay connected. So for me, the change ambassadors are the perfect network to keep all the pieces together and help us have a more dynamic exchange of ideas and conversation. Today, we really want to discuss, the three of us, and I will defer mostly to Saskia and Martin because it's been a while since I personally have had to be involved in the selection of change ambassadors, is what makes the right person, or what is the right sort of attribute or characteristics of a great change ambassador. What we won't be talking about today is about preparing these people. That's actually what we did in part one. And some of you may think, well, that's not logical, cart before the horse. But it was actually in response to a requirement of a number of people we knew. So we did that. And then in that conversation, people said, well, how do you find the right folks? So here we are again, showing up to help with that. So as you know, there are no single correct answers when we talk about change. The variable is we're working with human beings. And when we work with human beings across so many different demographics, be they geographic, cultural, different ages. I know that I heard yesterday something describing that now some workplaces have 5 generations in the workplace, which is mind-boggling to me, but also really exciting. So when we think about how organizations are, because they are made up of people, there is really never one right answer. But our job today is to try and exchange really good ideas to help you get a handle on what might be ahead of you, or if you've already selected some folks, is there something you can do to enhance that network you already have, extend it, etc. So we really hope to be practical and helpful in that way. So I think to start, let's use our chat function to do a polling question. First of all, what I'd like to ask is, what thoughts do you have about what a really, I'm going to use the word in air quotes, cool change agent is like? So who are the best? What describes the best you've ever seen? And I would like to say the best you've ever seen might be you. So go ahead. If you want to describe yourself, that's also absolutely perfect. And use the chat function. We'll keep an eye on it. This is just to give us some ideas of what your thinking is.
I put my favorite change agent of feminism in.
He looks pretty cool.
He's beyond cool.
Perfect. Well-liked and influential. I love that, Clara. Yes, good communication is so important. Those who talk genuinely and positively. That is, for me, one of the most important things. Some of you who know me well will know that I love the term radical honesty. If a change agent cannot be radically honest, probably not the most ideal person. Supporting the project, yes, and have power to implement it. Interesting. Okay. Genuinely support. I think I saw someone who wrote something about a passion for change, an authentic person.
Mm-hmm.
Love that page. We've had many conversations about that. Early adopters. Yes, I think curiosity is so important. Someone who's a collaborator. Absolutely. Wow, we've got some great ideas in us. Someone who has capacity to do it. That's interesting too.
Yeah.
Martin, Saskia, and I were talking right before we let all of you in that this might not be the end of our series. We may have some others ahead because there are some things that have already come up, and one of them, I think, is around capacity. That's a big conversation, which we may follow up with all of you in a different way, or it might be a session, but capacity is a big one. And then we were also talking about the impact of ChatGPT and AI, for example, which again, I think is a future conversation. Converted detractors, that definitely can be an option. I think Saskia's got some very good examples of that. Also,
I also like the role model, because role model, they are not managers, you know, but they still will be a role model in the change journey. So we will talk about that as well.
I love that. Absolutely, Martin, exactly. And someone who's more of a half full mindset. So positivity or optimism, I think, is really, really important. So, Saskia, I'm going to ask you to begin talking about your journey with change ambassadors and a couple of points of what you think has been really important as you've learned over the years, because I know we've talked about, you know, how you've evolved your thinking. Share with us a couple of things that you think are really, really important when you're talking about the selection of change ambassadors.
Yeah, thanks, Ursula. And what a great input already. It does seem like we have a very, very knowledgeable audience, so very keen also to build forward on that. But as Ursula said, I have indeed experience in different types of change agents, and maybe that's just good also to mention, because a number of people pick up on different things. I have worked on change agents also in some had the capacity to actually indeed do up to 25% of their time dedicate to really work on a specific change. So that's maybe on the biggest side, the most dedicated change agents that I've had. And all the way at the other end, I've also had people who just had to almost like wear a button that says, hey, if you have a question on this, you can ask me if I happen to be around. So very light on commitment, but in any case, it gave them something. So I think whoever you're looking for, it is really important to know what kind of role they will have. And I know that last time we also talked about making sure that you get them really in. Right. So, and I love that also, but some people said capacity, but also the positivity, because you have the best change agent, the best champions are those who are there, who are showing up, who talk the talk, who walk the walk, either when you're there or when you're not there, when it's officially part of their role, but also when they're outside of the role. And I think Ursula already triggered on, or I very much triggered on the converted detractors, because whenever we're talking about change champions, there's always one person that pops into my mind, which is the picture person that I picture with detractor. I worked for almost 10 years as a consultant, and after that I've always worked in a capacity as a change manager. So in that role, I always have sort of the hat, or I'm being paid to think the project I'm supporting, I'm doing, is a good idea. So the biggest thing of having a champion is that they actually have lived it through. And that converted detractor, those are the people with the annoying questions, the people who are constantly raising their hand, asking another question, typing those long emails at the end of the day that you don't want to read because they will be right? Martin knows what I'm talking about. So, but those are the people with the passion. And however much that person frustrated me, I do love the impact that she had on the program, because she was really influential with those annoying emails. She picked out things that we missed because she had a different view. And I think if I come to a main point that I want to start and then hand over to Martin, because I know he has some good stories as well, is get people with the real invested interest. I think the easiest pitfall you can have is to go for the friends, for the easy people, the people who are like you, the people, the early adopters. You need to have them because that's good, and you need the happy people, but you also need those annoying people on your board. So maybe that's my first point. Get some annoying people on board.
Well, and you have a great example, Saskia. And I think that's, it's powerful when you have an example like you have, and you've described, how those people might show up in our lives, asking the questions, sending the emails, and that's a good way to spot them. So
Absolutely.
I love that. Martin, tell us about
just to make the bridge from Saskia, I think if you want to be a real good change ambassador, you need strong opponents, because that's the opportunity to grow. And I think those people I met who were successful, they were able to operate on 3 layers. The first layer was, what are the global impacts, which apply to all companies, regardless of the change projects you're doing. But they understand that we need to operate, with remote works, we have to operate with this hybrid model. Sometimes you have to deal with people you have never met because they sit in Australia and you are based somewhere in the US. And also you need to understand the teams today, and you work with the teams who are impacted. Those teams today are not just internal workforce. We have vendors, we have temp people, we have contractors in the team. So they need to deal with different types of how work, and of the boundless, let's say, HR, where you have even, in projects, you have gigs, there is no fixed job anymore. So the complexity has increased. And in the meantime, the speed of change has also increased. So you can say change ambassador. I mean, change is happening automatically, whether you're doing a change management projects or not. But progress is not happening automatically. And that's what change ambassadors are doing. They are actually progressing the project by being, let's say, human-centric, because Saskia's and my job are as a change manager to provide the framework, the tools, the roadmap, and we actually enable those change ambassadors, which we covered in our first part session. But in the second part, it is this, what is a cool change ambassador? The first layer is this global thing to understand. And the second layer, of course, is the technical part of the project, what we are going to train them. So I don't want to spend too much time on it, but they need to understand what is the roadmap, in which phase are we? Are we in design phase? Are we in implementation phase, etc.? They can learn that. But the third layer, and that's the most important layer, is their individual inner change to go through. whether they have done it before, so they are a bit more mature, or they are actually open, curious, let's say creative. So they actually represent the part which AI cannot cover. You know, they are super empathy, they are super creative, and super curiosity. So that they bring that values into the project, and they can be the bridge. So, for example, people say, "Oh, AI, it will take away my job," and they say, you know, all these companies are talking about AI, but no one talks about the data foundation you need to have AI as being something which supports you. So then it comes to the paradox of transparency, as I call it, because you need to collect data. Maybe you need to monitor the performance. And people say, but sorry, are we in a credit social system in China because you collect all my data? So they need to turn this and say, yes, there is a danger. You can always use a knife to cut bread or stab someone, but there is also the opportunity that we can, you know, improve using those tools. And that's where change ambassadors are going to be a role model to explain and also hear what people are afraid of. Okay, so those three aspects, I think, when we can train them on those, but they need to be ready to go through that. I call it hero's journey, you know. And we can come back to that in more detail, but they need either to have gone through it or they need to be ready to accept that.
Martin, you raised some really outstanding points, particularly about how the sort of fabric of organizations and the context has changed so much, even in 5 years. Nothing that when I look at organizations today, practically nothing that I can see is the same as my last corporate space 5 years ago. I mean, everything has just changed so much. You also triggered a line of thinking for me that we didn't actually speak about in our preparation, and this idea that we are moving from a very sort of diagnostic approach to change to something that is more dialogic and emergent change because of the speed that change is happening. And because sometimes I've seen it, you know, mid-flight of a project, technology is even changing. For example, if it's a technology sort of innovation. And so a project might actually take a bit of a left turn mid-flight. And so we have to keep thinking about this. And also, to your point, you know, a really great example was what COVID did to us. We had to change, and then we're changing again and changing again. And this hybrid model is definitely here to stay. It's not one size fits all. Organizations are flattening. And so when we think about change, whether we like it or not, emergent change is becoming more of the way we are going to be successful making progress. There's no question about that. And so selecting those change agents who have these very sort of human, a human capacity, if you like, for connecting with other humans is so, so critical. Because you can have people who understand all the detailed kind of technology stuff, etc. But if they don't have their own human capacity for empathy, compassion, optimism, resilience, all of those things, they could be actually a negative energy in the system. So you really gave me some fabulous ideas. And you also gave me an idea to ask another poll for the audience, but I just want to have a quick check in the chat to see if there's anything.
While you're checking on that, because I just want to lift up one comment that I wrote down because I thought that was so important and often overlooked. And I think you both touched on it. It's skills can be learned, but the mindset is key. And I think whenever you're selecting your champions, it's sometimes easy to look at those skills, right? Do they have the right this, that skills? But I think if you have to choose someone with a great mindset, and both of you summarize some of those essentials, but not yet all the skills, or someone who has all the skills but a meh mindset, I would choose the mindset anytime, because those skills can be learned.
Absolutely. You know, you can compare it with the dogs and the palace of 1,000 mirrors. You know, the dog goes into the palace, first dog and he sees, you know, the tail waggling and happy jumping, happy puppies. And the other dog, which goes into the palace, sees, you know, dogs angry and frightened. So you are always mirroring what comes back. And the mindset is something which I think cannot be just learned like this. It needs this hero's journey, but it also needs something to be aware of. You are not here to please other people, right? You are not bending yourself just to, you know, sell the change and you don't believe in it. You need to keep your corners and edges. You know, maybe you will be confronted with people who are not agreeing with what you're saying, but you need that strong backbone. And this strong backbone, you get along, because we are here to support. We are here to, you know, the alliances and friends, as Saskia mentioned. But at the end of the day, you will have your big fights. And the big fight is where you have to slay your dragons before that, before you can become a hero. Again, you need to have strong opponents to become a hero.
Exactly. So one of the things that was triggered for me, Martin, and I would like to poll the audience, is whether or not change ambassadors should always be internal. Or could we look at using external resources? So, for example, if you're in a situation where you have maybe some Issoria consultants working with you, whoever, would you think about using internal and external people as change ambassadors or change agents? Would you tend to always say internal is better? I'd love to get a bit of a read on that for us. And then I know in one of the conversations I had with someone who is actually on here today as a participant or an audience, we had a conversation about when your change impacts your customer and how do we actually do that. And we've just started this conversation, and I think this is very germane to that, because now the barrier, if you like, or the division between organizations is so much more permeable, just because of the way the world is with technology, etc. So in many instances, I feel like our customers, our collaborators, and sometimes even our competitors, if I think about the pharmaceutical industry, have come way, way, way closer to us. And so I just love your thoughts. Is it preferable to have internal folks? Would you think about using externals? Do you have any examples of using external people as a change agent? So hop in the chat, share some things. The three of us will monitor the chat for a moment. Thanks, Ida. That's a really good point about the in-group and the out-group. And I think the same probably applies to internal, the way I've seen it anyway. There's always in-groups in organizations.
Yeah, I see even, so I'm in my role within Philips, I'm part of the people function, previously known or also known as HR. And I can already see that sometimes when we are driving a change that is also linked to an HR or people kind of focused, and people go like, oh yeah, but you're HR. So you indeed already also internally, you have some in groups and other groups.
Yeah. And therefore, I feel it's not always a good idea to use that as a core filter for selection, because the hope is also, as we work through the sort of networked change and really drive emergent change, we should be breaking the barriers down between in-groups and out-groups.
I see some great comments here, and I like the established relationships are highly important in this case. Yes, it really depends on how you do the setting, because in general you could say yes, we need internals because they have a network, they know the culture, etc. But I had a case where the company hired me and a colleague of mine who was also a freelancer, explicitly external, because they said we don't want to burn our internal employees. But they also communicated this upfront to the countries being impacted. So the managers in the countries which we then visited to execute the change, they already knew, and they gave us enough time to establish those relations, right? So we didn't come, let's say I was in Milano, in Italy, and I didn't come there and say, okay, this is what we are going to do, boom, boom, boom. It was about, okay, who is that person? Can you tell me the difficult ones? The risk, and they were very open. I also must say it was an IT company, so they were more, let's say, modern. Maybe in a bank it's a bit different. But there is no yes or no, especially when you have meetings, you're sitting in a room with 10 people. I didn't even know who was internal and external because they all collaborated so well together. And then I approached the guy and I said, but you are internal, right? He said, no, I'm external. I said, wow. So it doesn't matter when you are in the execution phase. And yes, those externals have they're a bit longer. I see one of the, I wouldn't say negative, but challenges is when you have externals and internals. The internals often are being perceived as the inner circle because they are, employees. They have more, they get more information also from the project itself. But then it's up to you as an external change ambassador to actually improve the interaction. Because if you know how to communicate with the people, you will be then recognized as someone who is almost internal.
Right, as an extension of the team. Yeah. Exactly, yeah. Martin. I really love that. I'm just going to go back to the chat for a minute because one really caught my eye from Michelle Monetti. Michelle said, she worked on a project where they used clients as change agents for something that was impacting all of their clients. Michelle, would you come off mute and just say a little bit about that? And how did you work with the clients to identify who the right people were?
We worked on a project where we were implementing a new ordering system that was going to impact all of our clients and how they ordered as well. And so we went to many of our clients, especially ones that did a lot of business with us, obviously, who we knew we'd have a vested interest in making sure they were happy with the system. And the client group was very tight knit. And so they all knew one another. They had other boards, other forums where they talked to one another. And so we worked very closely with them to, show them the benefits of the change, to let them beta test it so that they could go out and tell other clients how much better it was. I think the risk there is they also told them about every bug they encountered, which, that's part of
it. It's radical transparency. So yeah,
exactly. It is part of it, but it did require a huge time investment because when they had questions, when they had problems, when they had, anything come up, concerns, you had to address them quickly because they were going to talk to all of your other clients if they didn't get an answer.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing with us. It's a really, really good story. And it sounds like a very worthwhile case study for anyone else who's considering using clients or customers as change agents. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Michelle. So I think at the point where we are here, I think we've really sort of come to the conclusion that we definitely need to think about people who've got those sort of human attributes down pat. But what else is there? Saskia, you've talked about some other things that you look for when you're selecting change agents.
Yeah, there are a couple of things that are really coming to mind. And I think one of the things, and you alluded to it already a little earlier, some companies have 5 generations working at this time. And I think it is really important to think about diversity when you look at your change agents. And that diversity can be in many aspects, but one thing that I think very often is overlooked is think of some of those generations, right? Because I think quite often we go for the people who are a little bit more experienced. They should have about 10 years experience, know the culture and everything, but that means you're missing out on all the Gen Z and most of the millennial people actually, that truly, and I'm learning more about this every day almost, truly work and digest information in a different way, but they make up a big portion of your audience. And at the same time, I've rarely seen senior leaders be part of a network, a change network or something like that. And that means that very often you also miss the older generation, right? And those are the people that sometimes say, I've worked here for 25 years. I've seen four other changes go. I have 5 more years to my pension. I'll just sit this one out. But get that insight, get what didn't go well in those 4 previous sessions, get that knowledge. And if you broaden your perspective to maybe include the intern who's just really eager and keen to get going, and maybe also include that passionate person who might be in the last years of their career, but has a true will to also share their experience and leave this place in a better place than they got it. So I think if I think of one maybe a little bit out of the box kind of extra thing to think about for your change agents or your champions, think about those diversity, the different generations, and actually have a check how is your audience built up, and make sure that you're representing them in your champions.
Oh, absolutely, Saskia. I mean, belonging is one of those very important human aspects of being part of an organization. So I think you're right on that. And as you were talking, I was having flashbacks to my career, because I've always tried to reflect the different generations and other, differences in my audience with my change networks. And 2 things that you have said sort of connected in my brain. The other part that sort of connected for me as you were talking about that is the detractors. So exactly like you said, I have at various points met people who've been later in their career, maybe not that close to retirement, but have gone through a number of big change programs, may have not really seen anything that's been stellar in terms of the experience of change, and so have become a bit jaded. And so their detractor gene is perhaps not disruptive, but is a drag. So I'd love to get people like that involved, because they have the wisdom of past experiences that we can learn from. And they would also be able to tell people if this experience is different. So, they would be able to do a compare and contrast. Oh, when we did that program, awful because of ABC, and this is how we're handling this, and it's going to be much better because of XYZ. They can do some of that very authentically and genuinely because they have the lived experience. My personal experience has been that the younger generations are very seldom detractors in a way that I would describe as negative. They might ask a lot of questions, and the questions are very smart. So I always go to the youngest people first, because it's like, you've been, closer to your school and your academic training and what have you. What are you hearing? What concerns you? What questions do you have? So I love looking at the younger folks first as sort of change agents, and then looking at those who've really been through the sort of, if you like, the core years of their career. They're probably people, who have got 10 years still ahead of them, but have got some scars from big change programs. We all know people like that. Some of us are those people. And figuring out, how do we get them to bring their wisdom of experience, re-energize themselves, and see how they can play a role. Because to me, a change agent is also a leadership role. And, you know, I think about, again, when I think about people managers in organizations, yes, they have a leadership role too, but they have such limited time. So when I think about, you know, how do we actually lead change? There's a number of players in that space. And for me, change agents are pretty much the number 2 or number 3 line of defense, if you like, or line of growth for change that we can have in an organization. So I love what you say about different generations. Totally hear your point about, you know, what they would bring. And absolutely, I would be going after those people who have some scars to try and turn them around and help them see that their experience is really going to be valuable for this particular change. And I think also, by the same token, sometimes we have to be bold enough to turn people down. So we'll talk about recruiting them in just a sec. Martin, do you have any other thoughts on, you know, other attributes that you would be looking at? You've mentioned many, but is there anything else, as we've been talking and we've been watching the chat, anything else come to mind?
Yes, I think mixed teams are best, you know, young and old, and often the reality is different. You know, companies have the culture saying we have diversity and inclusion, and then the person joins the new team and sees 90% of the team are female, or opposite, there are only men in the team. And then so the culture being set and reality is a gap. And those people left after a couple of weeks because the company is not honest, it's not integrated what they are proposing. The second point, which Saskia mentioned, I think is super important, is the change fatigue. What is the experience? You know, is it the 4th change program? And the change ambassador selected told me, we didn't even implement our last change program, and now you're coming with this new one. And he was somehow kind of cynical. But at the end of the day, he was a very good change ambassador, because there was another thing which we fixed with him. And that comes back to the chat about inner and outer, you know, and being included. Are you being taken seriously? How are you perceived as a change agent? I realized that there is often, you know, people have been insulted, or, you know, there is this ego game. And how can you deal with that? Because if someone sitting in the head office is insulting you in front in a meeting, that change ambassador was super upset, you know, because it was more, let's say, on a personal level instead of a professional level. But then I said, look, what you can do is, change ambassador is all about interactions. It is human-centric. And if you train them, or if you make sure that they can use some, let's say, mental techniques, right? Because nowadays, I also see this TikTok thing, you know, younger generation, you don't have to react immediately. You know, something happens and people expect to react immediately. No, you don't have. Number 2, they go into resistance immediately. Okay, I have an opponent, or they justify, or they say, oh, I'm a victim. No. The first thing you need to do as a change ambassador, if you are facing a difficult situation, yes, yes, I have a time pressure. Accept what it is, you know. And number 2 is you can deal with that, because, and now we talk about communication, interactions, and manipulation. So you need to divert between those 2, and you can choose. Should I play the manipulation game, or should I be more authentic, more who I really are? And then you don't adapt to that spin, right? So during the interactions, you actually say, well, I do not go into resonance with that other person who is resistant, or, you know, whatever is the obstacle. And then you say, I don't need that, because everything which fits to me can come, and everything which does not fit can stay away. And I think that's the conclusion, as being someone who has a backbone, going through a difficult change. You can actually learn that. So that guy was suddenly changing his mindset, and he was very successful as a change ambassador, because he was able to deal with the interaction.
That's great, Martin. And, you know, I mean, what you're talking about really are some of the key attributes of leaders. So, you know, if I can just one line it, think about when you're looking at these people who you're going to be embracing as change agents. Would you follow them? I mean, that to me is an easy litmus test. Here I am. If it's Saskia, would I follow her? Would I listen to her? Would I take guidance from her? Would I, you know, if I have a question for her, would I feel safe asking her those questions? So that's really awesome. There's a few things in the chat that I just want to address because I think they're really important. One of the questions was, you know, what about leaders? Wow, that's a that's a big question. So I'm going to just share my particular perspective on that. If a leader does not see themselves as an agent of change, there's a problem. That's a systemic problem in some organizations. And I think that if you are working on a very large program and you have feedback or you see, you know, you're as a change practitioner, you are an objective observer of what is going on. If you feel that the leadership in your organization at any level, whether it's C-suite, you know, mid-level managers, which I read a fantastic quote today that said mid-level managers are often the permafrost in the organization. Very hard to get through. I love that quote. But if you see that in your role, because to me, a change practitioner, whether you're internal, external, whatever hat you wear or whatever your job description, you're also an agent of change by the nature of the fact that that is the work the organization is requiring of you. So if you see things like that, you really need to raise questions like that. And I'm sure more events coming with, you know, discussions about this. But when we talk about leaders, I also think that, and I have some scars, and some of you know about my scars, I do think that if you are a senior change management professional, change practitioner, OD practitioner in your organization, there are sometimes beautiful opportunities to reflect back to very senior leaders what they are doing. But you have to do it in a way that they get the aha moment. So sometimes a whole program will go by and you'll think, gosh, I really wish I had the opportunity to tell the COO, CFO, whoever about their behavior. And the opportunity doesn't really ever come. But be on your toes, because when that opportunity shows up, it will be one of the key learnings for a leader as a change agent. So I've had a few of those in my career, and I would say out of probably the 18 or 20 times in 30 years, I was able to actually say to a senior leader, can we have a quiet chat about something that you might not be aware of? There were only 2 occasions when that conversation did not go well. But in neither case did I lose my job or anything like that. I just learned how to do it better. So I would say, you know, courage, backbone, resiliency, these are things that we all require in organizations, because at the end of the day, with the amount of change facing us, the speed of change, which will never, and I saw Saskia, you put Justin Trudeau's quote in there, change will never be as slow as it is today. I mean, today is the slowest it's ever going to be for any of us who are sitting here. So we all need to think about what is our role in sort of promoting progress and bringing other people with us, because this is not a one-man show or a one-woman show. We need to be able to rise together, which is one of the key things about a change agent as well. They need to have interest in the success of others as well as interest in the success of themselves. So I think that's a really, really important point that someone brought up about leaders. And I have written some stuff about change leaders, etc. We've run some things about change leadership. So definitely we could do more on that in the community to help all of us as change practitioners. There was one other thing I saw. Let me see if I can quickly catch it back. Oh, the question about institutional power. So I think depends on your organization. I know some of the people who are on the call here are working in very large, multinational, very structured organizations that have many, many layers deep. I wouldn't say that necessarily means that if you are not in any of those leadership layers that you have no power. To me, If you can influence 3 colleagues around you, you have power. If you can help 3 people have a better experience of change or move towards the desired future, you have used the power you have in a very, very helpful way. And I once worked in an organization where basically, you know, it was all about institutional power. It was back in the day when there were very few women in leadership positions and so on. And I had a brilliant mentor at the time who said to me, you know, as a change agent, what is most important is that you can actually help the person next to you realize that this experience of change is like money in their pocket. Because if it doesn't go well and they choose to leave and go to another organization, they have taken value from this experience, and that has never left me. You do not need institutional power to help others realize the value that they're getting from the journey. And if they get the value and stay well, we see great performance and great results coming out of the work that we're doing as change agents. So briefly, in the last sort of couple of moments we have left, I just wanted to ask you, Saskia, because I think in Philips and in your career, you've had some really good examples of how to actually recruit change agents. So if you could very briefly give us the 2-minute nugget of how you've been recruiting change agents.
Yes, thanks. So I think there are, everyone knows, like, you can let them volunteer, you can let them be appointed. But I think if there is one sort of secret trick that I think really works, is genuine care. And that is care for those people. Like, reach out if you also truly think that those people have something to gain, right? You are not putting a burden on someone, but you're actually giving them an enriching, a learning experience and a potential to step up. So genuinely care for the people that you're selecting, but also genuine care for the program that you're rolling out and the people that you're in the end trying to reach. So make sure that you make that connection and that you really think, put yourself in the shoes of the end audience, and then think, who would I listen to? And I think that that genuine care for your people in both levels, that is the secret sauce for getting great change agents. Because if you care for them, they will care for you and they will care for their people. And then that's momentum. That's when it really, really happens. So I'm starting to learn that more and more. We have a great network of change champions within Philips, and I honestly care for those people. And I love seeing them grow and seeing them connect. And every time they're more, we're like, yes. And you can't fake that. So that's make it real. Don't use it as a trick. Say, hey, I love you very much. Doesn't work if it's not real.
Wonderful. Thank you, Saskia. I know you've been very successful with that within Philips. Martin, from your point of view as a consultant working on some massive projects over time, what role have you played, or how have you recruited change agents from, you know, a consultant perspective?
I've seen it all, from the worst selection to the best. But before I jump to that, I just want to pick up one of the quotes where leadership I have worked with say, that's for them, not me. Mostly US, not EU. Totally agree with that. You know, I had a CEO in a country which we integrated into a US company who took over that new company. And the CEO told me, this change project, you know, I'm not interested. You know, it's for them, it's not for me. And I said to him, listen, if you do not support me in this change, it will all fall back to you. You will burn your fingers if you don't engage. And then he started to think about, oh my God, what's in for me? So if I do not actually support sponsorship, I will have a problem, and it's not about them. So you need to explain why we are doing it. And, you know, for me, a change agent, going back to the selection part, they ignite the sparks, you know. We don't talk about work. Work means something, oh my God, or a career. Career is a plan. No, they have a mission. So they see it as a mission, and they are so passionate about doing it. And those people I saw, they are really willing to go through that journey, right? Because often when they are selected, even if they apply it themselves, you know, you have, when you start the journey and there is no point of return, there is a little step between where they have their doubts. They say, oh my God, I accepted this new role, but I have no clue what this will mean to me. And that's where Saskia and me are jumping in. But that's also a normal reaction, because these people, you know, I've seen sometimes, I had one company, it was private owned, 20,000 employees, 4 billion, so not a small one. And at 7 p.m., my change agent, by the way, he wasn't a change agent by that time, the chairman came to the office, you know, in the evening, and he said, oh, hi. Oh, by the way, I need to select these change ambassadors. You are my change ambassador. And he had absolutely no clue. So, you know, selection can happen randomly. He actually failed because he was totally overwhelmed with his job already. And then he became on a long sick term, you know, sick leave. When he came back, obviously we had a different person then for change ambassador, and we talked to the chairman saying, hey, don't burn your people. He is one of our best horses, but you know, you need to be also realistic what is possible and what is not possible. Another story I had, it was like when a new selected change ambassador calls me and says, I saw my name on a spreadsheet being a change ambassador. Then I talked to the manager saying, but you need to tell them before, right? We always handle it because we then kind of explain what it means, this role. But often you have the problem that these people do it as on top, you know, like what Saskia mentioned, it's not just pressing a button. You know, the management says, well, it's like 2 hours per week, but actually it became like 4 hours per day. You know, and they worked like after 6 p.m., they still did their change ambassador kind of follow-up. And that's obviously a problem which you need to fix by giving, you know, the line managers of these people are super important, that you get them into the change project as a sponsor, but also, you know, if you release your best horse, we as the change managers need to make sure that this gap can be filled temporarily. Yes, it is not good for you because it's your best girl in the team, but see it as an opportunity also for her and for the company, because when they return, again, it's the hero's journey. They will be a different person. They might leave the company, but they might go back to the same team, or they might take a new role, but at the end, everyone will benefit from it.
So the recruitment is really, really important. And I think, you know, just to reflect on what Martin said, we discussed some of this about, you know, what line managers and things can do in terms of support in our part 1. So if you haven't had that, I would sincerely suggest get in touch. We'll get that to you for sure. This has been such an interesting conversation. And, you know, when we have these conversations in the community, it takes me back to all kinds of places, and I almost feel like I want to have another crack at being a change agent myself, because with, you know, as we build up our knowledge of these things and what really works, there isn't a one size fits all, but the willingness and the backbone are absolutely super important. And I think over time, when we have a change agent, any change agent of any age, any kind of description at all, who feels supported, they will grow not only in their business acumen, which is huge, and we haven't spoken about it much specifically, but they will also grow in their courage as leaders. And to me, that's really where it's at. Not everybody wants to be a director or vice president, but everybody wants to have influence in a way that is genuine, in a way that is not harmful to other people. Well, certainly, I say everyone, most everyone. And so I think one of the paths, the development paths, is being a change agent or a change ambassador. I want to thank everybody. This always happens. We plan for an hour and there's so much, and I feel we could easily go for another hour because so many ideas have come up. I love the things that have been in the chat, and thank you so much, everybody, for being so engaged. I hope that everyone has taken away 1 or 2 nuggets that you can immediately think about how you will use them in your own particular environment. As you know, the Issoria community is always there. So if you have questions, feel free to email me. If you've got ideas for other sessions, we're always open to, building out what our community delivers to you, because you are our community. And most importantly, I want to extend my thanks to Saskia and Martin again. You guys, I shouldn't say you guys, that's terrible. Saskia and Martin, you are awesome. I love the preparation with you. I love the fact that you bring your experience. I love the fact that you are both pithy and open. And it's really cool doing this series with you. So thank you ever so much again.
Maybe one thing to add, you always have 3 choices, right? You can love it, you can change it, or you can leave it. And we are here. If you don't know how to change, we are here to support you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Martin. May all of you enjoy your afternoon, evening, morning. If you're in my part of the world, it's still before lunchtime. Have a great day and look forward to connecting again soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you.